Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into how the massive upheavals of 18th century Britain, we're talking political, economic, and social revolutions, actually gave birth to one of the world's most lasting art forms, the novel.
It sounds like a bit of a stretch, doesn't it? How do you get from a power struggle in Parliament and the invention of the steam engine to a story about a guy stranded on a desert island? Well, it turns out the connection is everything, and it shows us how a society's biggest shocks and changes completely reshape the stories we tell ourselves. Okay, let's get into it.
So, our story really kicks off in a Britain that's, well, it's just coming up for air. The country had been through a century of absolute chaos. We're talking a brutal civil war and the super strict social rules of the Puritan era. Honestly, people were just desperate for something new.
And that something new got her name, the Augustan Age. The idea was that the nation was finally entering a time of peace and stability, kind of like ancient Rome did under Emperor Augustus. This created this incredible sense of confidence, of possibility, and it really set the stage for some profound, and I mean profound, changes.
Okay, so the first ingredient in our perfect storm was a huge shift in who was actually calling the shots. The old way of doing things where the king had all the power, yeah, that was starting to break down.
And you can really see this slow-motion transfer of power right here. On one side, you've got the monarch, the hereditary king, who's becoming less and less involved in the day-to-day running of the country. And on the other side, you can see a whole new center of gravity forming in Parliament, with political parties, the Whigs and the Tories, starting to control the entire political landscape.
And you know, this didn't happen overnight. It wasn't some dramatic coup. It was more like a gradual chipping away at the king's power. It really got going with George I, who was German, wasn't all that interested in English politics, and basically just let his cabinet run the show. Then his son, George II, lost the right of veto, which was a huge deal. By the time we get to George III, Parliament's dominance was pretty much a done deal.
Now, let's move on to the second massive storm cloud that was gathering, a complete reinvention of the British economy. And I'm not just talking about a few tweaks here and there. This was a revolution that would completely reshape the country itself.
It happened in a few key stages, and each one was like an earthquake. First, this enclosure policy basically privatized a ton of common land. This created huge farms for a few landlords, but also pushed a whole class of people off the land and into the cities looking for work. Then, farming itself became a business, all about technology and profit. Finally, that same mindset took over manufacturing, leading to factories and a totally new way of life. This wasn't just about money, it changed everything.
And just to get a sense of the scale of this change, get this. Britain went through what they called a canal mania, building 2,000 miles of canals just to move stuff around. That, plus game-changing inventions like the steam engine in 1776, literally wired the country together and just poured gasoline on this economic fire. But this fire wasn't just forging iron, it was forging a whole new kind of person.
Okay, so here's where it all comes together. All this political and economic chaos created something that had never really existed before, a large, literate, and super influential middle class.
And these people were not aristocrats. Their status didn't come from their family name, it came from their businesses, from commerce. We're talking about merchants, lawyers, factory owners. And for the first time in history, you had this huge group of people with some education, some free time, and a real hunger to see their own lives, their own values and worries, reflected in the things they read.
This quote just nails it. The old stories about kings and queens and epic heroes from ancient Greece, they just didn't mean anything to a businessman from Manchester. This new audience wanted stories about things they cared about: hard work, making your own way in the world, social mobility, and the messy, real world they were building.
And so, naturally, a whole new media landscape just exploded to give them what they wanted. Journalism took off, newspapers, magazines, you name it. And right alongside it came the novel, a long story about regular, or at least relatable people trying to figure out a complicated world. This was the disruptive media of its day for sure.
So, you've got this huge new audience hungry for stories. Well, that demand was met by a totally new kind of writer, someone who saw the incredible potential of this new medium to tell stories for this new, modern world.
Let's just look at two of the very first pioneers, Daniel Defoe and Jonathan Swift, and meant they could not have been more different. Defoe, he was a businessman, a journalist. He was writing for a middle-class audience that basically shared his practical, no-nonsense values. Swift, on the other hand, was a highly educated church dean, a total insider, who used his incredible wit to write these scorching satires about the very system he was a part of.
Defoe's masterpiece, Robinson Crusoe, was the perfect story for this new age. I mean, on the surface, sure, it's a great adventure story. But if you look closer, Crusoe is the ultimate middle-class hero. He's practical. He literally keeps a ledger of his supplies. He builds a working society from nothing, all by himself. The story is a celebration of the values this new class loved: individualism, hard work, and the power of reason to control the world around you. It was like holding up a mirror to their own ambitions.
Swift, though, he used the novel as a weapon. Gulliver's Travels might look like a fun travel book, but it is a razor-sharp attack on his society. He holds up this distorted mirror to England. For instance, the tiny Lilliputians go to war over which end of an egg you should crack open. That was a direct and pretty savage parody of the religious wars that seemed so pointless but were tearing Europe apart. Swift was forcing his readers to see the absurdity, the darkness, hiding just beneath the surface of their confident new world.
And if you really want to feel the raw power of this new kind of writing, you have to look at his essay, A Modest Proposal. It's absolutely shocking. He uses this cold, twisted logic to suggest that the poor in Ireland should just sell their children as food for the rich. It's grotesque, but he's doing it to shine a light on the real horror of poverty and the fact that nobody in power seemed to care. It is satire as an absolute weapon. So in the end, the novel wasn't just a new kind of entertainment. It was the tool that an entire society used to make sense of a world that had been completely turned upside down by revolution. Which kind of leaves us with a big question for our own time, right? In our age of AI, climate change, and global disruption, what are the new stories, the new novels that we're creating to make sense of it all?